Okay, today we're going to be reading chapter 9 from our Dolphins at Daybreak Magic Treehouse book. And chapter 9 is called Ouch! But before we read that, let's do a quick recap of chapter 8, which was called Swim for Your Life! If you remember, Annie and Jack were swimming away from the submarine, and which was still in the ocean, and they had seen the shark, the hammerhead. And so Jack read that they had to swim calmly. So they were starting to swim calmly, and then they were getting tired, and they weren't on the land yet. So then Annie said to float, and Jack and Annie started floating on their backs. But then Jack was thinking, oh, I'll just float for a little bit, and then I'll keep swimming. But the longer he floated, the more tired he felt. And then he actually started to sink. And then he felt something touch him under the water. He thought it was going to be the shark, but in reality, it was dolphins. Do you think it was the same dolphins that they saw when they first went under the ocean in the mini-sub? Remember, Annie gave them some silly names? I'm sure we'll find out in chapter 9, which is called Ouch. Before we start reading, I want to remind you that good readers visualize the book as they read. So this says, can you visualize this in your mind? So as I read the words, which we know that the Magic Treehouse books don't have a lot of pictures, I want you to really listen. And even if you want to close your eyes and just listen and imagine, almost like a movie, what's happening as I read. Okay, chapter 9. Ouch! The sun shone on the ocean. It sparkled like a diamond. Jack felt safe now. His dolphin was taking good care of him. The dolphin slowed down as they neared the reef. Jack lowered his feet. He felt the bumpy coral. He let go of the dolphin's fin and stood up in the water. Annie stood too. Then she threw her arms around her dolphin and gave her a big hug. "Thank you, Suki," she cried, and she kissed the dolphin's nose. Suki tossed her head and clicked at Annie. "Kiss Sam now," Annie said to Jack. "You're nuts," said Jack. But Sam nuzzled Jack's head. Then he put his flippers around Jack's neck. So the dolphin has his flippers around Jack's neck. What do you think he's trying to do? Yeah, give him a hug. I could kind of see the dolphin giving Jack kind of an awkward dolphin hug. Jack couldn't resist. He threw his arms around the dolphin and gave him a quick kiss. Sam nodded and made clicking sounds like laughter. Then he turned to Suki. The two dolphins chattered to each other for a moment. They nodded at Jack and Annie and swam gracefully away. "Bye, Suki. Bye, Sam," Annie shouted. "Thanks," Jack shouted. The dolphins leapt high into the air. That means they jumped out of the water. Then they dove back into the water with a splash. Jack and Annie laughed. "I wish we could swim like that," said Jack. Jack and Annie watched the dolphins until they disappeared. "I miss them already," Annie said softly. "Me too," said Jack. He sat down in the shallow water. "I'm really tired," he said. Annie sat beside him. "Me too," she said. The warm water lapped around their shorts and t-shirts. Jack pulled off his pack. He took out his glasses and put them on. They were blurry with water. "Guess what?" said Annie. "What?" said Jack. "I saw the shark when we were swimming," Annie said. "But I didn't tell you, because I wanted you to stay calm." Jack stared at her. "Yeah, I saw it too. I just swam faster so you would swim faster." "And I swam faster so you would swim faster," said Annie. "I guess we swam double fast then," Jack said. He shook his head with wonder. "What now?" said Annie. "We go home," said Jack. "But we haven't solved Morgan's riddle yet," said Annie. Jack sighed. He pulled his notebook out of his pack. It was soaked. He pulled out the ocean book. It was soaked too. We failed, he said. My research is all wet. We'll never be master librarians now. Jack put everything away. Let's go, he said sadly. He stood up, then he started across the pink reef toward the treehouse. Annie followed him. So right now I'm visualizing they're soaking wet because they were just swimming in the ocean with the dolphins. Jack has his pack on. It's probably dripping water because the books in there are all wet. His notebook's in there all wet. He's probably got a sad face. And he's probably like dragging his feet in the coral. And Annie's probably right behind him, looking sad too. Ouch, said Annie. What's wrong? Jack looked back. I stepped on something. Annie bent down to rub her foot. What? Said Jack. A shell? Yeah, this. She picked up a large gray shell. Boy, is it rough. Rough and gray as a rock. And plain as plain can be, whispered Jack. They had found the answer. The shell looked like a clamshell, only bigger and with more ridges. How could this ugly shell be the answer to the riddle, said Annie. What about the part that says, there's great beauty in me? Wait, research, said Jack. He opened the soaked ocean book. Pages were stuck together, but he was able to turn a few. He found a picture of the gray shell. He read, divers search for oysters in deep water, but sometimes oysters wash up on reefs or beaches. Inside some oysters you can find a pearl. The pearl's natural beauty makes it a treasure. It must have a pearl inside, said Jack. Annie peered into the crack between the two halves of the shells. I can't see anything, she said. How does a pearl get in there anyway? Jack read aloud from the wet page. Sometimes a grain of sand will get between the oyster shell and its skin. This irritates the oyster. That means it bothers the oyster. So it makes a pearly material to surround the grain of sand. In this way, over a few years, a pearl is formed. I can't tell if there's a pearl in there or not, said Annie. Maybe we should bang it against a rock, said Jack. Now that would really irritate the oyster, said Annie. Yeah. Maybe we should leave it alone, said Annie. She gently put the oyster back in the water. But how will we know if the oyster is the right answer to the riddle, said Jack. Morgan said we'll know, said Annie. Come on. Jack pushed his glasses into place. Then he and Annie picked up their shoes and socks. They climbed through the window of the treehouse. Morgan's scroll was lying on the floor. It was open. Look, said Annie. She and Jack stared at the scroll. The riddle had faded away. That means it disappeared. In its place was one shimmering silver word. Oyster. Morgan's magic, whispered Annie. Jack let out a huge sigh. Oh, we got it right, he said. And there's the Pennsylvania book, said Annie. Let's go home. She opened the book. She pointed to a picture of Frog Creek Woods. I wish we could go there, she said. The wind started to blow. The treehouse started to spin. The wind blew harder and harder. Then everything was still. Absolutely still. I wonder if your prediction was correct about that chapter, if you made one. And also, I hope that you were visualizing what was happening while I was reading, because there wasn't many pictures in this chapter. Next time we read, we're going to be finishing the book by reading chapter 10 called The True Pearl. Can't wait.